episode of Gore War. This week on the show, the battle that has pretty much been the inspiration for the entire series, the one I've wanted to do from the very get-go, and I'm finally doing it. This is Darkness Falls versus Dead Silence.
Sounds good to me, Fedora.
So in the town of Darkness Falls,
Great name.
Great name. Apparently 2 boys have gone missing, and the town decides to blame it on one particular resident named
Matilda Dixon.
Matilda.
Yeah, this happened like 100 years before the movie actually starts. So.
And they blame it on her. And they decide to hang her, I guess, in their fit of rage, only to realise that the kids never actually died.
No.
They never actually died.
If they literally just waited until morning,
yeah,
it would have been fine.
They would have come back. She actually comes back to the town and decides to haunt everybody in the town that loses their final tooth. When a child loses their final tooth, they say don't look at the tooth fairy, even though that's never really ever been a thing. And you gotta make sure you don't look, because Matilda comes in and she'll kill you. Cut to the future, and we find that Kyle is now suffering from, everybody else thinks it's night terrors, but it's actually Matilda haunting him, waiting for him to fall into the darkness. The darkness falls. And so he ends up having to return to his town because his childhood friend, her little brother, is now suffering from the same fate.
I think the biggest problem with this movie, which our next movie thankfully doesn't suffer from, is... Now, Matilda was killed 100 years ago. I should probably point out as well that she was caught in a fire, which horribly mutilated her, basically, so she could never go out into the light. And since then, like when she was killed, she came back for revenge, and this has been going on for 100 years. Absolutely nobody in this town realizes this.
And so kids are dying over the next 100 years or so, and they never ever once be like, maybe it's to do with that thing about that haunting of that lady with the teeth.
Nothing.
Pissed me
Nobody.
off so much.
Dead Silence. This is the movie that introduced me to the awesomeness that is James Wan, director James Wan, who went on to do Insidious and The Conjuring. The story of Dead Silence. It's very much like Darkness Falls. We have a small town in the middle of nowhere. This one is called Raven's Fair. I'd love to meet the person who names these places. We have a talented ventriloquist by the name of Mary Shaw. And she was around in the 1920s putting on a show. Now, but she had a particular heckler in the crowd, and she didn't appreciate that too much. But no one could suspect what happens next. The heckler disappeared, and everyone in the town, or at least his family, the Ashens, and a couple of other families in the town, instantly blamed Mary Shaw, invaded her home, forced her to scream, and cut out her tongue. And she inevitably bled to death. Now, as is the way with old ladies who are killed in obscure ways, she rises from the grave to curse the town.
A great trope, yeah.
It is, yes. It's become its own genre now. Our main character of this movie, this is like obviously 80 years down the track, Jamie, one of the last members of the Ashen family. He's moved away from Raven's Fair now. He's living somewhere with his wife. Until Mary eventually tracks him down and kills his wife off using one of her 110 dolls or 120, something like that. She has a lot of dolls, a lot of puppets. But Billy is the one that we see the most, or Slappy from Goosebumps, as I call him. But obviously, with the death of his wife, Jamie's forced to return to Raven's Fair to solve the mystery of Mary Shaw and basically try to stop her curse from spreading any further. The stories are too similar to really pick apart, because it's basically the same thing. But the fact that nobody in Darkness Falls has any inkling about what's going on, even though it's been going on for longer than what's been happening in Dead Silence, is just mind-bogglingly stupid.
Darkness Falls doesn't come anywhere near close to Dead Silences. It had a really good story, but it explains it way too quickly, and then Darkness Falls kind of just sort of trickles off.
So, with that out of the way, I think it's a no-brainer that Dead Silence is going to take up the story.
So our main protagonist, Kyle, I guess you could say he's meant to be sort of a tortured person because he's witnessed his mother's death.
It wasn't really explored, to be honest.
No, and he didn't look as tired as he should have been, and he didn't look as drained and a bit nutty. There really isn't many other like main characters except for Katie and for
the little boy.
The little boy.
He, despite he's going through this currently, but Carl's been living with it for at least a decade and a half or something like that. He seemed fine, but the little boy was like mentally screwed. I think we can both agree that both movies have a particularly, I suppose, bland cast. I think we can both agree with that. No one really stands out. I mean, Dead Silence as well. We have Jamie. I mean, yeah, he reacts to his wife's death quite strongly, but he sort of mellows out as the movie goes on and he becomes kind of bland, a lot like Kyle.
Yeah.
And we have some side characters as well, some more likable than others. We have the old man, the caretaker of the funeral home. He's quite likable. He's a likable character. He's a sweet old man. I think the only character to really stand out, even between both movies, I mean, not including the ghosts, obviously, who we'll get to next, is probably the cop who deals with the case of Jamie's dead wife.
It's weird because he comes off almost comedic in a way with the fact that he has his own trait of randomly shaving when he needs to shave.
He's such a wanker, but he's interesting.
He was the most interesting out of the bunch. Yeah.
I think this is very interesting because the ghosts, while very similar, they cover two very basic elements. It's sight versus sound. With Matilda, her essence is the rawest of human fear. It's fear of the dark.
Yep.
I mean, even if you grow up, it still exists at the back of your mind, that primitive fear of the unknown. On the flip side, we have Mary Shaw. Now, I've talked Mary Shaw in my top 5 femme fatales, but you joined me for. Actually, no, you talked. Which I love her atmosphere building, with the fact that she turns off all sound when she's around. Now, while Matilda represents this, like, primordial fear, as far as her personality goes, there isn't really one. She's just sort of like a predator. But then we cut to Mary Shaw. Now, she does have a personality. She is sadistic. She is proud. She has a lot of pride.
She's just
she has a stronger presence.
Yeah, that's the right word. She's more of a stronger presence, whereas Matilda feels like she has a weakness wherever she goes. And so, you know, for her to be blocked out constantly by light, she's not as scary until you get into the dark.
So it is a really close call, because, I mean, I love both characters. But with the addition of the cop as well,
yeah,
I think Dead Silence is going to have to take characters as well.
The visuals of Dead Silence, straight away when you put in the film, and I pointed this out to Chris when we watched it again, it just captures colour straight away. And it sounds funny when I say that because the whole movie is really grey. But straight away, the movie has its own colour and its own tone. And the one thing I pointed out was that, particularly on ventriloquist dummies, lips are red. And red symbolises blood, it symbolises fear. And that is the one thing that they make bright in this movie. And that's kind of what makes the visual stand out. When you see blood, you see it. Everything else around you, it might as well be, it's borderline black and white. In terms of the puppeteering and the way they do the puppets, I think all that's great too. I don't think it looked tacky or anything. They didn't make them, they made the bodies look wooden.
The puppets didn't talk themselves. I want to point out that I think that's a plus on this, because we didn't want to turn this into another, like a Chucky or anything like that. No. You talk about the puppets, actually. Puppets is actually, you can tell this is a James Wan movie right off the bat, because it became a trope of his quite down the track. Almost every movie that James Wan directs has to have puppets in it in some way. That's right. Saw, had Billy the puppet. This has puppets. The Conjuring and Annabelle, they're all there.
And a fun note, Billy the Puppet's actually in the movie. He's an Easter egg.
Yeah.
In the movie.
In Insidious as well, he's drawn on a blackboard in the background.
Oh, yeah, shit.
The visuals in Darkness Falls are a little dated on certain degrees, particularly with the final destruction animation. I mean, you said you liked that. It did seem a bit dated to me.
I don't know, I liked it. It wasn't bad.
But it didn't have any like heavy graphical overtone like Dead Silence or anything like that. It was a fairly basically shot movie.
It's about you only see little bits, so they can get away with the dark.
Which I suppose does work to the whole feeling of fear of the unknown, which goes towards Matilda's strength.
Because part of it's in your mind too. I think that's the
for the most of the movie, Matilda is covered by a porcelain mask, which is something that she wore when she was alive, because obviously she was burnt in the fire. So for most of you don't actually see her face until the very end of the movie, which does work to a degree as far as like keeping you in suspense, because you're always wondering, what does she look like under that mask? A lot of the movie is obviously shot in the dark, seeing as that's the main focus, and they do manage to do this quite well, particularly on one of my favourite scenes in the movie, which is the staircase scene.
Where they're jumping down the stairs.
When they're jumping down the stairs. I really did like this moment. It really does showcase like Matilda's ideology as a predator, which I suppose you can forgive the bits like we were talking about in the story where she picks off side characters instead of main characters, because she's not really thinking like a person anymore. She's thinking just like an animal that's hunting.
She's picking them off one by one. She's having a bit of fun.
She sees a bunch of shapes jumping. She just darts for the first one that she can get her hands on.
You knew it was going to happen when they jumped the stair.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that. Like, it's the main characters; they can't die.
Exactly.
But this is, but as far as graphics go, Matilda is just portrayed as just a black mass for most of the movie, which does work towards the mysterious strength that she's going for.
You could say almost that not only is the darkness a very good visual, it's a character in its own.
Good point. Yeah, I think that's a very strong point that it makes. I think Darkness Falls' flaws way more heavily on it. And you can just pick more on it.
Yeah.
Whereas Dead Silence, you appreciate its qualities rather than pick on its faults. So I didn't want this to be another clean sweep, but you get what you get. So Dead Silence is going to take it for visuals.
Basically, you could say that both these films were really fun.
Yes.
And you were saying Darkness Falls is a real underdog.
I do, yeah. I've always been a fan of the underdog. This movie is not very well received, but it's still fun. You can still get a kick out of it.
It's got good stuff.
It's got some good stuff. Like I love I love Matilda's premise, and I love movies that play on the fear of the dark, because like I said, it's such a raw instinct that we can all relate to. But it just had too many other problems. Like, we just couldn't get over how the town was so stupid.
Yeah.
And again, Dead Silence just had such a much larger impact on me watching it, and I'm sure it did for you as well.
It did, especially like, I won't give anything away, but particularly the twist in the movie is one of the things that, like, I kind of jokingly said it early on in the movie, and when it happens, and this is why like the Saw movies originally worked so well, is because particularly when the twist happens, my brain's getting blown out my skull, because I was like, oh my god, I should have picked up on that earlier.
Yeah, something like the twist. I forgot to mention that, because there are signs that point towards it, but you don't pick it up until it all comes together.
And it wasn't until we were watching it again that I was like, holy crap! Like, you see them the second time around.
Yeah. So for all these reasons, Dead Silence is going to take it. And that's all from us this week on Gore. So, I'm Fedora.
I'm Russ.
And we'll see you next time. Good night.
I don't know, I was gonna do like a puppet, and then I was like, what is this? And I was like, janky zombie, like.
That's all going in.
Yeah, I know you were gonna put that all in. I had a feeling you'd pull all that in, god damn it.